I grew up with the King James Version of the Bible. The passages I read this morning were from the New Revised Standard Version of the Bible. That version has simpler, more modern language, but I like the poetry of the King James Version. In the King James Version, the last verse of the Old Testament passage reads, "And after the earthquake, a fire, but the Lord was not in the fire. And after the fire, a still, small voice." So we have sheer silence in one translation and a still, small voice in the other. Still, in this context, means no air movement. It is standing still, and hence no sound. Therefore, the two translations do have the same meaning. I prefer a still, small voice. As we begin our look at the Old Testament reading this morning, let me give you the story so far. If we had read earlier in the scriptures, we would have learned that Jezebel was the wife of Ahab, the king of Israel. Jezebel had brought the worship of Baal with her to Israel on her marriage, and it had flourished. Elijah and other prophets had spoken out strongly against this. In response, Jezebel had promised to kill all the prophets, and she had done that for all the prophets but Elijah. In a final act of defiance, Elijah had challenged the 450 supporters of Baal, also called prophets, to a show of God's power. Elijah, with God's support obviously, beat them in that challenge. Elijah then stirred up the Israelites to kill the 450 Baal prophets. Powerful Jezebel was now really after Elijah. So in our passage today, Elijah had run away and was hiding from Jezebel. God told fearful Elijah to come out of the cave and stand on the mountain, and the Lord would pass by. Elijah expected God to speak to him through a strong wind that tore the mountains and broke the rocks into pieces. However, God was not in the wind. An earthquake came after the wind, but God was not in the earthquake. Then fire came after the earthquake, but God was not in the fire. Elijah did not hear God speak through any of those three occurrences. Instead, God spoke to Elijah in a low whisper, a still, small voice. The first thing that struck me in this passage is how can the Lord not be in the wind or in the earthquake or in the fire, which are all elements of nature? God created this earth and all the things in it. So why is God not in those things? Let us investigate that. The reading tells us that the first element of nature that Elijah witnessed was a wind so strong it split mountains and broke rocks. I have never been, nor do I wish to be, in a wind so strong that it splits mountains. The fiercest storm I have seen was when I was a young Royal Navy midshipman on a cruiser in the Bay of Biscay. The Bay of Biscay is a stretch of the Atlantic Ocean off the west coast of France and the north coast of Spain. The waves in this region tend to roll back and forth in the bay and gain in size in some storms. This was one of those storms. The cruiser I was sailing at 12,000 tons and over 500 feet long was a big ship. As I stood on the bridge, I could see the bows sink beneath the waves and keep going down until the huge forward gun turret was underwater. There was a pause, and then the bows would slowly rise, shaking water off one side, then the other, until the bows broke the surface. And then it started all over again. I sometimes hear people say that man can control nature. I chuckle to myself as I recall that storm, and I think, you should get out more. So was God in that storm? Did God send me a message? Other than to not go sailing in the Bay of Biscay, I do not think so. This Old Testament passage tells us that God speaks to us in a still, small voice that no one else hears. Frequently, people anticipate the way God will speak to them. Like Elijah, they are usually wrong, because God can get a person's attention in a way that is least expected. God usually does not speak in a loud voice because he does not have to. Leaders with real authority do not have to yell to get people's attention either. During these past few weeks, I have heard too many news clips where people, supposed leaders, are yelling at the crowd. I rush to turn them off. I think the louder people yell, the further they are from the truth. Last summer, I was asked if I would like to be an elder at Central. I had served as an elder before at another church, but got burned out. I decided back then I would not do that again. So when asked this time, I gave a polite but firm no. The next day, while driving, a small voice in my head said, "You should do this." And so a mental discussion started, which persisted for a few days. You may think I was going crazy having an argument with myself, and you could be right. But I was not really arguing with myself, was I? I was arguing with that still, small voice. I eventually said yes. This week we begin Lent. Lent is a season of reflection and preparation before the celebrations of Easter. By observing the 40 days of Lent, Christians replicate Jesus Christ's sacrifice and withdrawal into the desert for 40 days. We are all familiar with the story of Christ being tempted by the devil in the wilderness. Lots of people give up things for Lent. I am going to ask you to start doing something for Lent. Practice withdrawal into a quiet place, your own desert, and give yourself some time to listen for that still, small voice. If you feel the need to give up something for Lent, then give up the desire for constant connectivity. Go for a walk by yourself and leave the earphones behind. We cannot be open to that still, small voice if we are overwhelmed with sounds and thoughts from our everyday lives. We need some peace to contemplate opportunities in our lives that we may have previously turned down or never even considered. Opportunities to serve others, opportunities to give of our time, talents, and financial resources. Do not be surprised if you initially respond no. Be open to a continuing dialogue. The church sanctuary will be open this Wednesday, Ash Wednesday, from 5 to 6 p.m. to give you an opportunity to hear beautiful music, participate in the imposition of ashes, and receive a blessing. The details of social distancing protocols are on the Central website. This quiet time in the sanctuary would be a good opportunity to begin listening for that still, small voice. We have heard this morning how Elijah was in the midst of some terrible natural disasters, but then heard God's voice in the silence after the disaster. We have also looked toward the season of Lent and how we may prepare ourselves during this period leading up to Easter. Finally, we give thought of how we might use some quiet time of reflection to investigate new opportunities of service and giving. Remember, God's still small voice is just waiting for the opportunity to have a discussion with you. Amen.